Good morning, podcast, and welcome to a new episode. My name is Pierre T. Lambert, and today I have an amazing guest. My guest is Erick Hercules. Erick is a photographer who helped redefine a new genre in footwear and lifestyle photography, and his subject and angle choices have become viral ideas that transcend digital media. X photographs have appeared on billboards in Shanghai and Times Square, stores like Foot Locker, auction at the Guggenheim Museum, and published in magazines internationally. So he has some cachet and some proof of work right there. He's a self-taught photographer. Erick's musical training provided a useful framework for his non-traditional path into the world of still photography, and that's something I think is going to be very interesting to dig into. Currently, Erick is the Sony Alpha ambassador, World of Dance contributor, and educator for the next generation of digital photographer. He currently leads his own visual and strategy agency called Hercules New York, and the chief creative officer and co-founder of INCMMN. I think I got that one right. A new age B2B agency bridging the gap between creatives, agencies, and brands. Pardon my accent, it goes all over the place sometimes. As an advocate, Erick is also the Secretary General of the Influencer Council of America, where he leads creative first conversations directly with digital platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. He has spoken on leadership panels at American colleges and universities and consulted with brand agencies and places like the White House, aiming to help communities move forward. Erick, this is not a short bio. I love it. There's like so many just from that aspects where I'm like, let's dive into this angle. So I think it's going to be very interesting. We've got a few things to talk about. And for the personal note, before we get started, Erick and I, we met in 2019 at Kando, an event organized by Sony. And yeah, we hit it off, had interesting conversation, debates even, and shot also some levitation photography, which you're really known for without Photoshop. So Erick, welcome to this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to see you, Pierre.
It's awesome to actually flip a little bit the discussion because we met in New York City recently and we had tons of conversations. But when you go through the podcast aspect, I'm able to do a little more background search and find topics where I'm like, okay, let's dig into just that. Whereas if you're reading it up in the middle of the street, it's kind of weird sometimes.
I agree. But I'm excited to, dig deep. So ask along.
All right, Erick, I'm very curious about something that you wrote down. It was that you actually studied business, and there was a component of opera in it and music. Can you tell me a little bit about what's your origin story and how did you go from that to falling into the photography world?
Yeah, man, I think it was a very organic transition. I mean, I started singing when I was 8. My dad is a mariachi singer. He represented Ecuador in like the mariachi festival in Mexico like every year,
No
which was
way.
which was super interesting. Yeah. So I always looked up to my dad and his musicianship and how much he gave into his art. So obviously, I started singing at a very young age, and I guess I was discovered, my voice was discovered super young. So my mom really took that seriously. And that's part of why we actually came to America. My parents wanted to give me really good training for voice. In South America, I don't think art is regarded as something that you do if you want to if you want to make a living. They don't take it really seriously, and so they wanted me to have a bigger goal in life. And so they've been supportive from the start. I came here, I immediately joined the school choir, and by the time I was 10, I was singing in this choir called the Young People's Chorus of New York City, whom introduced me to Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, Madison Square Garden, and they allowed me to perform with in all these major projects. So as a young kid being trained in voice, I thought I was going to be the next opera singer, and so I went to high school for singing, then I went to conservatory for singing, and 3.5 years into my conservatory career, I realized something. I realized that I wasn't really happy. And the reason
Hmm.
why I wasn't happy, I came to find out, in hindsight, was that I was doing it because everybody told me I was good. not because I really wanted to do it for a living. But during that time, I had started this t-shirt brand and I needed to do photography for this t-shirt brand. I was about 19 or 20. And so I bought this cheap camera, this Nikon D80, and I started shooting with it everywhere. And at that time, Instagram was just coming along, and I was just posting a bunch of like iPhone only images. So I met a couple of friends through there who also kind of had a vision for photography. All of us amateurs, and I started hanging out with them, and photography really kind of started to become my love in there for the freedom that it gave me. Opera is a very rigid art form. You need
Mm-hmm.
to sing in a certain way. If you sing Baroque or if you sing romantic, you can't do certain things. There are certain parameters that you need to think about every time you pick up a piece of classical music. But with photography, I mean, it's the world is in your hands, and you don't really get to say what's right or wrong. You just do something because you feel it. And so I started discovering, we did puddlegrams back in the day, and then slowly evolved into levitation. With brands, but eventually, yeah, I guess business school fits into this equation because I had to quit opera, but I couldn't tell my mom, "Hey, mom, I'm just going to quit opera and pursue photography." I had to so what I did is I quit opera 3 years and a half into my career, and I went to business school. So I studied business for 3 years and a half again, and in that second half of the last semester of my business school career, um, one of my biggest campaigns opportunities came out. So Swatch hit me up and they were like, "Hey, we love what you did with this one dancer, Rocco Deasy. He's a Jabberwocky from Las Vegas. He's like, you guys just levitated this phone in front of him as he was jumping in the air. We want you to do that for Swatch, but you need to do it this week." And that week was finals week, so it was between taking my finals or going to Las Vegas to shoot this campaign. And I chose to go to Las Vegas, and here we are. you know.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to just do what you feel is right, and I've always seen an opening for me in photography, so I took it. And um, I'm blessed that it's worked out the way it's had, and I had a chance to meet all these incredible creative people like yourself through it. But that's a little bit of how the evolution kind of took place.
How did the I'm curious because I can only imagine, when you're trained the same way, or like for, let's say, music, and for singing. Was it a slow transition in your mind where you feel less and less interested, or you realize more and more that is, or is it like a wake up thing where in the morning you're like, oh, this isn't really me, it's what others think I should be doing?
It took a little bit of, so I guess I ran from home twice to pursue this photography thing. So like I was really about it. I was like, "Mom, I can see myself doing this." In opera, to be honest, I realized that I was doing it for so long that it had become a chore. It had become a job.
Hmm.
And that's something that I recommend that as creative is try to find ways to always, if you love something, try to find ways to always fall in love back with the art form. And I think I didn't really do that. I was very young and I was already performing professionally since I was 12. So like
Hmm.
the parameters and my goals were so big that I think they trumped the aspect of just singing for fun, you know.
Yeah.
So I really didn't enjoy it as much. I didn't train as much. I didn't want to learn the languages as much. It wasn't as exciting to me as photography was, And I think I didn't really discover myself as much in classical music as I did through photography. But I must say the transition was easier because I think as an artist, you tend to understand a lot of concepts that just transcend art form,
Mm-hmm.
color and tone, a lot of things in classical music. You train how to study chords and what the chord progressions mean and where is home and where is the climax of the song and why that works. And so you come with all these ideas and then you just transpose them to a visual art form, and you still have the same things. If you want to shoot a fall winter campaign, it's more bluish and contrasty and dark. If you
Mm-hmm.
want to shoot something summer, spring summer, it's light and yellow and bright and so it's an easy transition visually if you study that the mechanics of it from a
Mm-hmm.
from a classical perspective.
That's fascinating. I feel like a thought came to my mind. I was like, maybe in this world there is another kid that was trained to become a photographer and went into singing, and you did the opposite. So you guys reverse role in the universe.
Amen.
But there you go. No, but it's so interesting to hear, because I think we're trained, like to go towards a certain path, and if you train from very young, you actually never really ask yourself the question, is it what I want to do? And I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just like, some people have to help you guide at the beginning, but there is a point where you probably look around and you're like, it looks like this like feeds me more than doing that, or it's less, there's less friction. And what you're
Yes.
saying about like falling in love with your art all the time really resonates. And it reminds me of a quote I heard recently, was something around the secret to a good marriage is to date your wife. And I think it's the same
Mm,
thing, you just become comfortable in your own relationships also, and you forget to go back or to actually reignite what you fell in love for. Suddenly your camera is just here, versus before it was like, oh my God, this thing is so exciting.
yeah,
So
and you said it right, and I think it also takes a lot of presence, and you have to learn how to be present with your art form, because at times you do it mechanically, you do it so much that it becomes mechanics. And
mm-hmm.
I went through that, which as I'll get to a little bit later with levitation. But it's like sometimes you do it so much that you're like, okay, uh, whatever, or okay, it's what's next. And so it is constantly just being open minded to say, hey, what are the possibilities, and what can I really challenge myself to do while I'm doing this art form, and how can I grow from this, and look at it as as you said it, as a growing, never comfortable scenario in which you can just enjoy and bask in the unknown.
Yeah, and we're gonna put seed for the future here, but we'll talk about the angles and how you are actually doing that
Mm,
own work of like trying to go back to the essence. Because obviously, if you shoot a lot, it becomes not repetitive, but you fall into that habit thing, like you said.
mm.
The work part. I'm curious, however, as to what aspects of music would you say would helped you the most in the photography aspect?
So music is, well, one of the definitions of music is it's organized sound. So if
Mm-hmm.
you were to take this note and just disorganize them, they wouldn't sound as pretty, or like this note, or like you
Yeah.
put them different ways, it would just sound like two different beeps or something. And so I've always loved the structure of music and how it's poetically written to take you on a journey.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I think I've tried to do with my work, is to take you on a journey. And the reason why I talk about this in my classroom, but it's the philosophy and the psychology behind levitation and why it's so powerful. It's because, music, when you listen to it, or like sometimes you have a favorite song and you have this one particular bridge or this one particular like highlight of the song that you can sing over and over and over again. You take all the song away and you have the climax of the song. And for me, for my viewer as a photographer, you have one chance, one image to show the spectator the climax of the song, the climax of the story.
Hmm.
And why levitation works is because you're giving somebody the climax of the story without giving them the context of the story. So
Hmm.
they don't know what came before, what came after. And as a human, psychologically speaking, we're thrilled, like we're always seeking information, like from a
Yeah.
survival mechanism aspect, you seek all the information you can get so you can have the context as to how to move forward. But when you see an image without context, it fucks with you. It
Yeah.
makes you wonder what came before, what came after, and it makes you wonder: did the guy throw it from below? Did it throw it up? Did somebody have did he have somebody throw the shoe for him? Like, did somebody catch it? Is it a net? How did it fall? Did he scratch this? Did he break the statue or whatever it is that's in the air? And so all these questions arise, and you're playing with people's emotions, and you're actually giving them their own way of telling the story of an
Yeah.
image, so giving them a climax, and then letting the spectator decide for themselves the before and after. And I think that I learned that specifically from music, the composition structure, and the feeling of we've arrived, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what I want to give my spectator when I when they see my work.
I love that. And do you feel, so I'm going to poke you on this one. Do you feel like we can give just the climax without the ramp up and the toning down behind? I'm asking that in photography because I guess you can, but I'm just wondering, what do we do with the other parts? Because I feel like they're important too in their own ways.
Well, you make a reel, right? No, I'm kidding. um,
No,
well,
you're right. You're
it.
right because it's like that's how I expressed it. If you're listening, is from the perspective of how we are looking at art nowadays, which is very fast moving and usually on devices, which means you're gonna just look at that one photo or that quick clip.
Yeah. I mean, I have a
But
lot to
if you were
say.
in a book or gallery, you could build up, I guess.
Yeah, but you see, well, there's so much I can say about this because, well, what I hate is when you need context for an image. When you
Mm.
look at an image and you're like, that's boring. And then somebody's like, well, no, it's because that's Picasso's plate and like he had thrown it in the floor like seconds before. You're like, oh, that's what makes it amazing. But I actually have, and I fight with a lot of artists about this, but I think a photo should be objectively good without any background or foreground. I think all of
Mm.
those things are externalities that you add to the importance of a photo. But objectively, a photo should tell, there's a saying, a photo should be 1,000 words. Then fucking add 1,000 words in that one photo because then it will be a
Yeah.
thousand and one if you add more context to it. And that's cheating
Mm.
because I can, and that's cheating to me, and so anyway, I probably hurt a lot of people's feelings, and I do apologize. But that's I'm speaking from the validity objectively of what a photo should be. I want
Yeah.
people to look at a photo and say, "Oh, that makes me feel good," or "That makes me feel something," regardless
Mm-hmm.
of external contexts. But just looking at a photo, whether it is Marilyn Monroe or just a random old lady sitting in a train station, regardless of of who the person is there, I want them to feel the same way. I want them to feel that power of the image. That's what good photography is for me personally.
Yeah, I know. I'll join you 100% on that one because it's not about how good it looks to you. It's how does it make you feel, you know?
Yes.
Because it's so easy to go rationalize out the composition and the the aperture or whatever. Like your shutter speed was wrong, it's a little blurry. But how does it make you feel? If you feel like interpelled or like if you look at an image or a piece of art and you keep scratching your head, I think it's doing its job. You know,
Yes. Yes.
if you're
And even art that you
intrigued,
might disagree in, there's art that you're like, what does
of
that even
course.
mean? But it gets you wondering. And it's like, you got to respect that.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone who triggers your emotions and with something they create, I think is good, uh, art wise. Let's put it in that context. But okay, so we've got the climax. You use that, and that really like drives your creations. And I felt it even when we were shooting together in 2019 when we did the levitation photography video. It was fun, and I felt like there was a subtlety to which shot you would think was right and what movement was right in the image, which most likely I would have been like, oh, this is cool, but you had a specific eye towards certain things. So we can put a link in the description to obviously some of that work, and I think you have a training on that coming up, so we can put that if people want to discover more around it. But I wanted to kind of understand how you go from um, the beginning of that levitation photography and how do you integrate that throughout your work, and are you able to, this is a difficult question, but are you able to move away from it not to be defined as just that one piece, and is there anything wrong with being that just that one guy?
um, I had an existential crisis during the pandemic. Um,
Hmm.
well, actually, three that I remember, and they all had to do with my purpose as an artist and
Hmm.
my growth as an artist, and also the value of my art. And I don't mean it monetarily, but what it means to me and what it means to the people around me and the people that consume it. So I'm a commercial photographer by trade, and the reason I did that is because I was a young broke college kid who ran away from two careers to pursue this photography thing. I had to pay the bills. And so strategically speaking, I decided to name myself a commercial photographer because I thought, well, you're going to get paid while doing what you like. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. And so I did. But what had happened was I discovered that I sold my artistry to commerciality. And what I meant by that
Mm.
was I did levitation for all these brands, and I made it almost like, oh, like the coolest way to sell a product to people. But I realized that levitation is so much more than that. And after spending so much time with myself during quarantine, I realized, wait, like I can see so much more depth into levitation photography, especially the fact that it's done without Photoshop, especially the fact that it's done without burst mode. It's all done in one take. And so all these beautiful techniques that I've developed were just used to sell shoes to kids, and I didn't want to be that dude. I didn't want to be that guy. And so,
Yeah.
and I've also realized that, a lot of the times my competitiveness and what drove me to create levitation photography without Photoshop was always a challenge to myself. How can I create surrealism within reality? How can I create something that people think it's fake in real life? I've always
Mm-hmm.
loved that challenge. And so that was the main point of levitation photography. That was the main point, to show to everybody, hey, look, you can do something that looks hella Photoshop, but it's not. And so taking that ownership back away from, hey, this is just a technique used to sell products, was very empowering, and was also very
Mm-hmm.
scary, because I was that guy that it was like, people hire me just to do these levitation images. And I realized that I'm much more than that as well. We as artists, I mean, we as humans in general, we're not the most brightest, we're not the brightest creatures. And I think we're pretty square when it comes to defining um, another person. If, like, let's say if Pierre, you decide to edit all your pictures with a super, super, super blue tone for the next 2 years, well, guess what? You're the blue tone guy now. And like, I don't think that's fair, Pierre, because that can be a part of your growth, but that can also, Da Vinci had a blue period. He painted a lot of
Yeah.
his things blue, but you don't know Da Vinci as like, oh, he's the guy that paints those blue um, paintings. No, you know Da Vinci for all the extensive work he did, whether it was drawing, whether it was painting, whether it was sculptures. And I think that we need to look at our artistry in the same way. We're so much more than what society or the industry
Mm.
defines us. I used to be the guy that promoted niches because I had a niche,
Yeah.
but I realized a niche is only good up until you realize you're stuck in that niche, and you realize you can't do anything else because it falls away from that niche. And that's a jail in itself. And so what I recommend artists is to always, once again, coming back to the beginning of this conversation, um, always look at your art as a way to explore yourself and to grow from it. Like, yes, you can have a series. Like I had, a good 6 to 10 years worth of levitation run, but like I think I can do so much more. And so that's where I'm at right now. Um, it's art is should constantly be evolving, and you should constantly be evolving with your art. And I think that's where the true meat of being an artist comes from. Yeah.
Yeah, I can only join you on that one. There is something that I keep reminding myself of, and that I remind a lot of people, is that uh, the scientist that discovered a bunch of things, Da Vinci, like you mentioned, was multifaceted. A lot of the philosopher we think about, also even Seneca and stuff, they were also mathematicians. They were also, in a way, doctors. They were studying the stars. They were basically very, very rounded persons. They were not like a sharp tool. They were more like a very wide tool that tries to look at different things different ways, and get curious about the whole world, and not just that one aspect that you might think, oh, this is the X guy, and he does only that XYZ thing. And I feel like I had a campaign that came to me, and they asked me to make an ad about myself, about my personal brand. I could not do it. I still can't do it, because I'm like, how am I supposed to encompass my personality in 30 seconds? So I managed to change the campaign, and it's gonna be about my training, so which is a lot easier. But about myself, I was so lost. I even like had 2 hour brainstorm with my wife and with another friend also, And I was like, sorry, like there's so much I'm interested in. I don't even know how to make it like fit anything. Because I don't want to be just that one guy that, oh, here's a video that shows what he does, you know? Well, no, there's more, you know,
And that's
like,
the
oh,
Pierre
wait.
DNA, you know?
Yeah.
Yes, that's the Pierre DNA. It shouldn't fit in 30 seconds. If it fits in 30 seconds, you're too branded, you're too square. You're only going to be that person. And you don't want to do that, you know?
Yeah.
We're in the era of like niches, like the girl who wears a red scarf or the person, and it's like I think we're much more complex than that, you know. And
Yeah.
and I'm so happy that you're understanding how the complexity of who you are and owning it. And that's the hardest thing for us as creatives to do. And I think it's a privilege to do because you and I can afford to do something like that. You
Yes.
know, a lot of creatives at the same time are spreading themselves too thin, trying to do everything or like trying to get on the next um hype train or trying to like do whatever is cool in the market right now. And so there is that slight balance in the middle where you have to say, okay, what is viable to the consumer, like to my clients? What can they come in and constantly hire me for because they know I'm good, but at the same time not having that niche solely be um you know having that niche define you, because you're so
Yeah.
much more than that once again. So it's
And
all
at the
about
end
that
of the day,
balance.
we do it for ourselves. We don't do it for the rest, right?
Amen.
That's something I remind a lot of photography students. Also, I'm like, doesn't matter if I like your art. It doesn't matter if your neighbor or 1,000 people like it. Like, do you like it? Is it oversaturated and way too much clarity for my taste? Yes, but you love it. Look, you're super excited about it. What am I gonna tell you? Keep doing what you're
Yeah.
doing. You know, like have fun and go
Yes.
for it. I can't tell you how to live your own life. You know, you gotta be in love with yourself and what you create. So that's the most important, I feel. How does
Yes.
the let's segue to those angles. Like I'm super excited to dive into that because Eric was like shooting with like funny angles when I was in New York, and I was like, what are you doing? What's happening? And then you were writing a few like captions on Instagram about how you're exploring actually different compositions, or what does it mean? Can you? Yeah, let's go. Let's dive into it. What's happening? What the heck is
Mm,
audio angles?
so so my second existential crisis told me that I I was tired of just being the levitation guy, because I needed to do something else that challenged me. And so I took it back to my roots, which is street photography. So I
Mm-hmm.
went back into the streets with a 90 millimeter and a 70 to 200, and I looked up at the sky. And I noticed that when I looked up at these textures and elements and lines and shapes and contrasts and shadows, um, that I had, thanks to like shooting commercial for so long, commercial photography is very mathematical. Like things need to be in the center, or like very rule of thirds, like very perfectly lit, perfectly background, like everything needs to be perfect. So commercial photography is very they're trying to sell you something. They're trying to sell you the best version of life as life can be, perhaps. And so I essentially, internalized all of that. So all those mathematics, all those rule of thirds and Fibonacci sequence that I learned in commercial, I brought them back to the streets. And this time I started to notice that, um, well, what is reality really but a perception from your perspective? And as
Mm-hmm.
humans, we have 2 feet on the ground, and that means that whenever we see up, we see the same up. But I mean, we're basing our reality based on gravity, and gravity is
Mm-hmm.
just one element of reality, and reality is so much complex in that. And so I try to challenge myself with these angles, using these mathematical things that I'm learning in commercial photography, to try to redefine how we see cities around us, essentially, how we see textures around us, and how we feel seeing these textures and cities being presented in a different way. And
Mm-hmm.
by flipping these angles, if you feel something, I am by definition proving to you that these angles have some sort of emotion. These little twists and turns and balances of lines and triangles and shapes and shadows make you feel something. And if I compose in the correct way, I'm maximizing a feeling from a perspective that you couldn't see before, because you were too stuck in your own ways. You were too stuck in what people think is right.
Mm.
So these angles were a testament to the objective truth in which anything can work. You know, I sit down sometimes in front of a couple of buildings and I shoot 15 different angles from the same perspective of the same building constructions. You know, all
Yeah.
you have to do is find the shapes and the elements that go together in a very communicative format that eventually lead to you feeling a certain way. And so
Yeah.
that made me realize a couple of things. First of all, I'm going back to, you know, what I told you is like, like subject shouldn't matter. Like the picture, a good picture should be a good picture, and a good picture should
Hmm.
make you feel something. And so what I'm trying to prove to the audience this time around is, look, I'm about to shoot two different walls from a random building that you probably walk through it time and time again, and you're like, whatever, those are two buildings, but I'm going to make you feel something by changing the angles for you. And if you
Hmm.
feel something, then you know what I'm telling you is right. It's an objectively regular photo, but I'm doing it in such a way that it makes you feel something. And to be honest with you, I call this angle study. I mean, I call this project angle studies because they're studies. Like I see some,
Hmm.
I must say, like some of them I do, you know, I do look as fine art. I do look at them as like something poetic and something that says something, but a lot of them are just studies. Like I like, look, people, here are some random walls that I'm sure y'all walked by because it's in 42nd Street, but you've never seen them this way, have you? And it's like it catches people by surprise, and that's what I want to do. I want to catch people by surprise and show them that reality can be perceived from many different angles.
Hmm. I love that, especially the last part. Reality can be perceived from different angles, and I feel like it also defines your experience, right?
Mm.
How you navigate through life in a way. Like, have
Amen.
you
And as
ever
you said
noticed
it,
the light around you? Nope.
I think we learn to appreciate a lot of the goodness around us once it's taken away from us.
Hmm.
Once again, we're very flawed in animals, but once again, is you know, these angles are also bringing in um, just presence into the equation. Like, hey, like sit down and look at that library in front of you that you always walk by every time like you walk from A to B, and you never really looked at it the way that it should be looked at, you know,
Hmm.
or like you always looked at it the same way. And the same way, technically, you know, it's not the wrong way, but it's just one way.
Yeah.
And if you look at it maybe in three different ways, you might discover something else, you know?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head here. It's not wrong. It's just that's only one, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I love. I mean, when I was in New York, etc., or even in Paris, what I love sometimes is just looking at tourists. What is catching their eye? Because
Oh,
my eyes get used to some stuff, and then you see another photographer who's never been to Paris or a tourist, and you're like, oh, is that interesting to you? Let me try to see why.
and don't they shoot the
What's
city a
there?
different way, you know? And like they can be the
100%.
same in the same place that you normally shoot, and then they come in and shoot something a different way. You're like, whoa, I never saw it that way. Like that's so interesting. That's what art is, such a powerful tool to communicate, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's weird. I love it. It's well, this even happened to me on the Brooklyn Bridge, like at sunrise when I was in New York last time. I was like, I never realized that the Manhattan Bridge was like poking between those buildings, and with the right angle, with the right light, just looked epic. And I was like, oh,
Beautiful.
and I biked so many times over that bridge, which apparently
Wow.
you're not supposed to do anymore. Um,
Wow. I did not know that.
well, not on the walking at the top, apparently. I don't know. Some guy was like
Hmm.
screaming really loud at the biker.
Well, welcome to New York. Everybody's screaming at each other lately.
How did yeah, let's dive into the COVID world, and what did it change, or how did how did you navigate that space?
it
Because New
it
York sounded
uh,
like the epicenter of the end of the world for a while.
it was transforming to say the least. Um, I mean, I came out of it a completely different person. I was a workaholic before that. I think I'm still a little bit of workaholic now, to be honest with you, but not as much, you know. But I learned to take my time. I learned to uh, let go of perfectionism. I was such a perfectionist, and we just had a slight conversation a little bit before we started recording this, and you said a quotable moment. You said perfectionism is uh, you said it was
Oh,
perfectionism is the key to laziness or something like, or it makes you lazy or something. It's a good excuse to
No,
make
it's
you late.
oh, I remember. It's the best excuse for
Oh,
procrastination.
procrastination, dude. And like that's
Yeah, it's
exactly how I
procrastination's
felt.
best tool. I think
Oh
that's why.
man, it that rung so true, to me. And I realized that, for example, I never wanted to start a YouTube channel because like I didn't have the correct lights and the correct backgrounds, the correct setup. Like I didn't want to start, this and that because editorial because I was so scared of this, I was so scared of that. And it's like, dude, like you're holding yourself to all these standards that don't fucking matter, that don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So letting go of all these preconceived notions of like what life should be was a big thing to me. And then another thing is, as I said, it's just letting go of like those niches that make you comfortable.
Yeah.
I found this niche. I did my thing in it, and I guess I built some sort of, um, I would say, reputation through this thing. But that's just not me, and I felt so jailed by one aspect. Like levitation to me is only 10% of what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning that there's another 99% of the world that like I still haven't discovered through doing video, through doing YouTube, through doing like more extracurricular activities that have nothing to do with photography. I think that's where life is. That's where the sauce is. That's where discovery is. And I was missing that for so long. So coming back to that was imperative through this COVID transition.
Was it the was it a break that made you get there, or because I don't know how was the situation? Tell us a little bit for anyone who doesn't know what the situation was like in New York. What forced you there?
Well, New York itself just closed down, and I felt very jailed in my home. And first of all, I
Mm.
started realizing as somebody who gets older, every year, you start missing nature, and you start missing the simple things in life, like seeing your friends and family. All birthdays were, through Zoom. It's just not the same. And so it humbles you down, coming back to appreciating the little things, appreciating the moments. It made me realize, like, dude, how many moments are you not appreciating? Like, here you are trying to chase the dream or try to chase more clients or try to like get this next big gig. And it's like, wait, hold on. Like, what are you doing it all for? Are you really happy? Because you don't seem happy. You haven't been happy. What makes you happy? Maybe
Yeah.
taking more time for yourself is going to make you happy. And you know what? I think it has. I think I'm happier now than I've been in the last 3 years. And I've also much more uh, aware and open-minded toward the possibilities of life now more than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. It's I felt like drive is a strange it's a double-edged word in a way. You're like, yeah, I want to progress, I want to do this, it's great, but then you ask yourself why. And I think deep down we do have that idea of it's gonna make my life better, make me feel different, or or like bring me closer to, I don't know, some goal of achieving something, which for many, and I've been there too, it's more like once I have that, I'll feel safe and happy. But
mm-hmm.
you
But you
nothing
don't,
prevents you
don't mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly, it's like nothing prevents you from doing that right now. There's this great story about I wish I remember where I heard it first, but of that fisherman. And I think he's like on the beach in Mexico or like in a warm country. There's this businessman from New York who arrives, and he's like, sees this guy come back with like one tuna or one big fish. He's like, wow, amigo, you got a lot of fish here, or a big fish. It's great. If you want, you can go back and and you can catch more fish, and then you can make a little money. And the guy's like, oh, cool. For what? He's like, well, then after, once you make a little more money, you can hire someone else, and he goes fishing, and next thing you know, you can hire more people, and you can build a business around it. And he's like, okay, and then what do I do? And then the guy's like, well, then you instead of going fishing, suddenly you manage this operation and all those people, and you make a lot of money, and it's great. You can buy those things, you can buy a house, etc. And the guy's like, okay, and then what happens? And then he's like, well, and then when you're older, you have all this money, you have this land, you have this house, and then you can retire and go fishing and spend time with your family. And the guy looks at him. He's like, but that's what I'm doing already.
Amen. I think you told me that quote last time as well. And it's so true. You know, it's like it's especially in America, I think we live in a very consumeristic society and a very
Hmm.
like goal-oriented society. Nothing is ever enough. And I mean, you need to look at the propaganda deep inside of that. Why isn't it not enough? Because you need more things, because people need to sell more things to you, you know, and that's part of like, you know, one of those existential crises I had during COVID as well, realizing, dude, like I don't want to sell, like here I am trying to work against the man while working for the man. How does that even work? You know, here I'm trying to be, you know, my own business and like trying to like live my own truth, while I'm like, you know, stuck selling, you know, commercial campaigns full time. And it's just like it didn't feel right, dude.
This must be. I mean, I can only imagine, but it gets a little. You tap into an area where most of us won't go because it gets very uncomfortable. How did you navigate through it, or what? Did you have something that brought you clarity or helped you along the way?
Well, I think meditate. My girlfriend and I started meditating and cooking a lot during the quarantine. I think those two
Hmm.
were the beginning of me learning about like, hey, extracurricular activities that actually make me feel damn good. Let's go, you know. Uh, but I think lately I have been microdosing, if that's okay to say in the show.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, microdosing on shrooms, and that's been transformative. You know, it opens up, I think, the the neuron pathways that, you know, talking about you see life in just one way. I think microdosing helps you see life in more than one way, and it shows you
yeah.
the options of what life can truly be, and the options of what the possibilities uh, can be if you just decide to just take more ownership of everything around you. You know, and I wanted to take more ownership. I feel like I trying to escape something got myself in another jail. And I
Yeah.
realized I don't want to go from jail to jail. I just want to be me. I want to do what I like. I want to show people that they can do it too. I want to liberate my soul and in return, liberate all my spectators. You know, when they see my work, it's more than just selling sneakers. Now I want to give them the truth. You know, I want to give
Mm.
them everything I've got as an artist, truly.
That makes sense. I love the tools you mentioned. The meditation part. I'm a big believer because yeah, I've been doing it. I think I started when I was in New York in 2016, a little bit before 2014 through Wim Hof and different things, but really I got interest in different aspects back in New York. New York's such an interesting place, by the way.
Mm.
It's like where everything happens, right? It's like you have Wall Street with people that kind of rule a certain part of the world. And then you have artists who are trying to break from that part, yet they're in the same environment. And then you have a few lost souls in the middle. And then you have people who are fully, let's call them enlightened or like content with being in the midst of it. And it's just fascinating place. Um, and cooking is gives you appreciation for what you're eating.
Dude, amen. I'm the chopper at home. So I chop and my girlfriend directs it. She's a creative director. But I loved working under her. You know, like that was so humbling. And it was like, Eric, like now it's time to chop the veggie, and now you're gonna do this. And it's like, let's go, babe. Like you do the thing, and I help, and you know. But it's that essence of like home has become something very important,
Yeah,
and and the act of doing nothing, if you're enjoying it, you're doing something, you
yeah,
know. And I think we forget about that in America. Once again, a consumeristic society. What are you doing to get your career up? What are you doing to get? It's like too much, and it's like maybe you're doing something that can actually help you, and you're going to come out more reflective and more positive and more tranquil towards life, and you're going to be able to approach these things such as work and business and whatever in a much more comfortable, passive, and actually more secure way, you know.
yeah.
So
So it sounds like those like actually those difficult moments actually have a lot to teach us if we don't turn away from them.
I think the only way to learn is to go through difficulty. I mean, if you look
Yeah,
at nature, in order for a tree to grow, it needs to fight through the ground. You know,
yeah,
anything that grows needs to fight through this uncomfortability of pushing, stretching, bending, you know. But I think it's that, and we need to normalize that. For so long, our survivalistic instincts have pushed us away from that because we want to feel safe. But what is safe really? But settling down, which is okay. You can feel safe, but if you really want the most out of life, get uncomfortable and make uncomfortability be a goal.
Yeah, yeah. It's a fine balance. I love going there. It's always that fine balance between, and for a lot of people it's like I don't want to feel that way, but there's so much to be learned that after you've experienced a few times how much you can learn from those, it's like, oh, I look forward to this. You know,
Yeah,
I used to be stage frightened in a way, or like, when you have butterflies before you go speak,
yeah,
or like you feel it like really heavily when you're a kid, or you have to do a recital, or you have like end of the year like show or whatever. You're like, oh my god, but at the time you almost fear it. But now it's almost like, now every time I have this come up, I'm like, oh, this is a good sign, something exciting is coming up,
oh,
it's like
nice.
something that is not as usual is happening. Like, what does it have to show me? Like, let's go, like,
Wow.
I'm accept it. It's not like, oh no, I don't want to feel that. Well, how do I suppress it? Should I take a anxiolytic or like some medicine, medical, how do you call that? Like drugs or whatever
Mention,
to
yeah.
tone it down? No, 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 no. Just let it run its course.
Let
Look
it
at it.
be. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's part of maturity. In fact, you know what I discovered recently? So 29 years and 10 years pretty much after I quit singing full time. So I still sing at a church every Sunday for the last 10 years
Mm-hmm.
since high school. Um, so they had a concert recently, and I realized that I've always feared singing in front of people, and I realized that I wasn't also meant to be an opera singer simply because as a singer, as a performer, you need to have two skills: singing and performing. You don't need to
Mm.
have the best voice, but if you perform and own that stage, people would feel it. You're
Yeah.
delivering this piece. Um, and you can have all the best voice in the world, but if you don't know how to perform, you're gonna go crack on stage or forget the words and whatever.
Interesting.
And honestly,
Yeah.
like I feel like the later part of my life, I realized that I mean, I haven't performed in, often, but I realized that performing was one of my weaknesses. And also learning to accept where you fall short is a big
Yeah.
part of my growth, and I realized, you know what, Eric, that's a big part of why you didn't decide to do opera. Because I spoke to an opera friend of mine, and she recently went through a hard time, and she said, you know what, Eric, like I went through this hard time and all I can think about was singing. And I saw her the next day after she had this like really really crazy evening the night before, and she was singing a concert, and she killed it. She did her
Mm.
thing. I felt her soul through that mic, and it was so interesting because then you realize, a lot of us are hardwired to do something, and it's finding out what calls you. So when you're like in despair and when there's nothing going for you, what is it that's keeping that light at the end of the tunnel lit up for you?
Yeah.
And for me, I found it that photography, and I also do, I also like just community building, but like
Yeah.
helping people, and like I love that. So like whenever I get in difficult scenarios, learning like, oh my god, where does my heart go immediately? Oh, trying to help somebody, or like, oh, like trying to do photography, or like challenge myself, through these. So it's discovering these aspects um that lead you to the light at the end of the tunnel. But it's interesting, as you said. It's there's so much growth that can come out of this art. Sorry, I think I went on a tangent and now I'm on a different topic, but that's the way life
No,
is, I
it's okay.
guess.
We can go on 60 tangent. This is la- just like our life path isn't linear, right?
Oh,
It's
amen.
conversations are never, which kind of is frustrating for my wife sometimes. She's like, "How did you guys go on 6 topics within 5 minutes?" And then you're coming back to it like 30 minutes later. What? uh,
I'm one of those two. I'm happy that I don't feel alone.
I know, it's great. I love it. I actually love it. If you guys are still following, that's beautiful. I pin down what you mentioned with the microdosing part, and for anyone listening who's interested, I will get someone on the podcast around this, around the use of psychedelics and creativity, and how it's being used. It has been used because it's nothing new. It has been used for many thousands of years, and and also what studies were made in the 70s and what's the status today, because I feel like it's come up basically more mainstream right now, and it's something I discovered, I would say, in my recent years, and it's a fascinating topic. So we'll 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 dig into that one, Eric. I'll let you know when it's out. I'm sure you'd be
Oh,
interested in
please.
that one
I'm
too.
highly interested. I'm still new to the subject, but I can appreciate any form of extra education. You've already sent me a couple of playlists. Maybe you can tag the playlist that you sent me on your other podcast because Pierre
Yeah.
knows what's up, guys.
I don't know. No, I'm just, again, I'm very curious human being. And what that means is that anything that grabs my attention for a little bit is going to be, I'm going down the rabbit hole on a lot of things. I'm like, oh, interesting. And there's a lot to be learned from plants and fungi, from our friends around, and
Oh,
animals.
what
So,
watch the show Fantastic Fungi on Netflix. I think you and I
oh,
had this conversation last time.
oh,
Must watch
yes.
Fantastic Fungi on Netflix. Watch it today. It's life
Whether you're
changing.
creative or not, it's, oh my god, the visuals are insane. All the time
Beautiful.
lapses. So I want to bring on the director Louis Schwartz, actually, who directed and shot all those time lapses and directed the documentary. So I want to try to bring
Beautiful.
him on the podcast. It should be interesting. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, honestly, right now, just pause whatever you're doing, write it down. Fantastic Fungi. We'll link it in the show notes. You're gonna have a blast, and I don't know, take a glass of red wine or chill with your wife and just look at it on the big screen. It's the magic of life just like comes through it, because we're not able to see time lapses with our eyes, right? Like
Mm.
if you looked at that plant, you think nothing happens, right? But then if you look at it through a time lapse of several days, you're like, oh my god, the thing is dancing, it's
It's
alive, it's doing
moving.
so many
Yeah.
things. Yeah. All right, let's dive into the completely 180. I want to hear a little bit about how you've seen the NFT space and what does it mean for us as creatives and also for everyone else. Like, yeah, tell me.
It's unbelievable, man. I mean, first and foremost, I mean, it's a highly volatile ground right now. It's a wild,
Mm-hmm.
wild west of this century, perhaps, and this decade. And what I'm much more excited than little JPEGs, although there's a lot of art that is beautiful. It's the technology behind that, the smart contract aspect, the fact that we're essentially democratizing the economic side of creativity, and
Mm-hmm.
it's favoring now the artists, the people that have been putting in the work for the last, you know, 3-4 centuries or something. For so long, I think the artistic, uh, the economic side of being an artist has always been regarded as like we're at the bottom of the totem pole. We're the
Mm-hmm.
least important. You don't really have any value. But now more and more we're understanding the validity and the usefulness of art and the power of ourselves in this economic market. If you look at the big companies like Apple or any big fashion brand, they wouldn't be the brands they are today without great marketing, great storytellers, great illustrators, great designers, great photographers, great animators. And these are the people that sell the vision forward. We are
Mm-hmm.
communicators by design. And so the way that I see NFT and the NFT space is it's a way to essentially give equity back to these creatives who at times get undersold or underpaid. I've done a lot of agency work before, and I'm within Common, my second agency. We're trying to redefine how creatives and brands work, and so the biggest thing for me has been the fact that we go and uh, we have collaborated with some of the world's biggest creatives, and when you look into their pricing structure, you realize, oh my god, like, dude, are you really charging that much for all this work? Like, you're getting so underpaid. I've seen companies charge, big agencies charge companies $300,000 for like a video, and then they pay the crew like 50K, and they just made 250K off this video.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like unbelievable. Where does the money go? It goes to the middleman. It goes to people that, like have high level ideas but don't really execute. And so
Yeah.
what we're seeing right now is a democratization of artists getting what they deserve and actually people supporting the artists that make it happen. So the way I see it is in the future, even through agency or creative work, working for big companies, you're not, you're what we're talking about is smart contracts that will essentially bypass the middleman. So instead of
Mm-hmm.
you as an artist getting 80%, maybe now you might be looking at 90, you might be looking at 95. And if you're really good, you might get the whole pie if you know how to build a structure around you. And so these systems that have been for so long um, within these bigger structures as a corporation or as as a big agency or as a big music label have now been democratized in smart contracts so that we as creatives are able to use them and forget about it. Because if somebody uses our NFT or buys our NFT or sells our NFT, we're getting some equity back. We're getting 5% back
Mm-hmm.
forever. And so to me, that's just transformative. And I'm super excited for the space.
Yeah, I'm equally interested to see how it's going to evolve. I ran my own experiment with NFT where I was just having fun with a project that was dear to my heart. By now, I've actually resent the money to all the collectors, the Ethereum, because I decided to stop it, and I'm like, cool, you collected it, you keep it. Here's your money. The rest of the project disappears. This is unique. There's only like 6 pieces that will ever exist in this space. The rest has been destroyed. Um,
It's pretty cool though.
but
That builds volume and hype. So congratulations.
we'll see. That's interesting. But I mean, I just love the message that was behind it. But I keep asking myself the question, which is simply, and it's impossible to predict what will happen, right? But where does the space go? Because part of me is a little afraid, not afraid, but like looking at it from the lens where, okay, we used to have gatekeepers in galleries, and that model came up because there was a lot of volumes and people wanted curation, right? And so people who wanted to invest didn't want to have to go through every single artist that is selling something in the street. So they're like, okay, those people, I'm gonna give them money, and they're gonna find the people that they think is worth something. And I can't help but think, in a way, as much as we're democratizing, we will. I feel like we will come back somehow to a model where there's some bigger gatekeepers, and I know the message in that community is all about like, no, it's decentralized, it's blah blah blah. But if you're no one and you're putting an NFT tomorrow, you still won't get discovered unless you're doing marketing. It doesn't matter, you still have to do that marketing aspect, and you still have to build your brand in a way where or mingle with the right communities, with the right people to get to people who want to collect actually. So what is really different about the space according to you?
I mean, that's a very good point, but I think as an entrepreneur, and I think all creatives who are making money out of their art or their service are entrepreneurs. So you should look at
Mm-hmm.
yourself as an entrepreneur. And so an
Oh,
entrepreneur owns
100%.
a company, and a company needs to do their marketing, whether you like it or not. A company needs to be out there. A company needs to do partnerships. A company needs to do branding, positioning. And so that's just another thing that we need to add as creatives. The beautiful thing is now art has become more collaborative. So I've seen a lot of
Mm-hmm.
art, like musicians with digital, like 3D animators and photographers, they all partner in one project, which is so beautiful,
Yeah.
So that is opening up the possibilities for, so art in itself, to me, honestly, is flourishing. And now it like the sky is the limit. You're adding some of the world's best 4D animators that have worked at all these the top agencies or the top brands in the world now coming along and like just doing 4D animations with like some of the world's best photographers or like best musicians. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of great Renaissance like art is about to be put out. So that's beautiful. I also think what's you're talking about communities, but also this is what I like about it, because the way I see it is, imagine if we had NFTs back in the 70s or 80s
Mm-hmm.
with the great Warhols and Basquiat's of the world, right? what you're essentially doing is, so Basquiat was essentially, a lot of his work was owned through a gallery. So the
Mm-hmm.
gallery took a lot of the take, you know. So what you're essentially doing is you're not going to the gallery, you're going directly to Basquiat and saying, hey, if I purchase this painting for $10,000, here it is. I get your painting, and now I have a digital licensing. So that means that every time I sell it, you, Mr. Basquiat, are going to be rich with me. So it is to my, you know, I would say to both of our pleasure to keep supporting each other, and like it kind of
Mm-hmm.
builds this like, well, you bought a piece from me, so like if you really like my art, you're gonna keep supporting me, or you're gonna talk to your friends about me, and in return, I'm gonna do more art and better art. So then, like, you know, the price of the art that you have will go up in price. So I think it's democratizing what Sotheby's has been doing forever, and it's
Mm-hmm.
bringing back more of that money that Sotheby's tends to keep, or the collector that flips it tends to keep, and giving some of that money back to the creative, which in turn fuels a creative to focus on doing art and not selling themselves on doing, you know, brand work to pay the rent. And so
Yeah.
that leverage, I don't think we've ever had that leverage in ever. And so that's transformative. The fact that we don't have to sell out as artists gives us a lot of leverage for us to fight back and say, you know what, I don't need to work this shitty project, or we tend to be undervalued because brands know, hey, here's a big logo, so work super cheaply on it so that then you can probably get better clients thanks to you working with us for this super little price, you know. And
Yeah.
I think that's slavery, man. That's so unfair. Okay.
It's unfair when you're not at the beginning anymore, but when you're already creating good stuff, it's it's totally unfair. You're like, no, that's not right. I think I know my art, I know my value. Nope, no,
But
thank
how
you.
wonderful would it be if a big brand calls up a young artist, and instead of pitching them, hey, here's a pair of shoes, they actually give them what's standard for an artist. Otherwise, if they don't pay that, they can't work with an artist. I mean, obviously, I think this might be too generalized, and I don't think we might get there, at least in my lifetime. But I wish I can see some more of that respect and equivalence when they do treat artists, you know, because once again, artists are very important to the nature of marketing, to the nature of telling a story. And finally, now we're learning how to value our price and our value our place in this market correctly.
Yeah, I think it definitely teaches a lot of people the value that people perceive as to art is not what necessarily is, which is beautiful because when you look at the pricing on NFTs and stuff, and yes, there might be a bubble, and yes, 90% or 99% might go to zero, but it still shows you that if enough people decide that this is valuable, it will be. And I'll just add to where, like, in a way, we're all building this metaverse or like this parallel universe digitally, and artists will are the one building it, right? In a way, it's you have the engineers also, but visually, who's gonna be there? You know, who's gonna create those things that you see and that you experience? And I think that's it's almost like you could be creating a new earth in a way, and as an artist, you have a take in what it's gonna look like. So, could be an interesting space for sure. How are you getting involved personally on it?
Yeah, man. So I have my first NFT collection dropping this December 4th. It's going to be
Mm,
50 pieces. 10 of them are going to be like high profile campaign stuff that I've done, or like high profile artists like the Jabberwockies or like Steve Aoki or something, levitating something. And then the other 40 pieces are going to be, they're going to be divided like 10 or 15 from one part of levitation, 10 or 15 from another part of levitation. So there are four techniques that, you know, that I've developed. The first was just like people levitating, which was the easiest.
yeah.
Then another one with you know Matthew Forget, but like dancers levitating. So that one is a lot more playing with angles and switching reality, which is a little bit more complex. Then I've been shooting, must have shot at least 70,000 pairs of shoes in my career. So it's like I have a bunch of like shoes that have never been released, you know, like shoe photography that has never been released, or a lot of
Mm-hmm.
shoe stuff that never really made it into the commercial stuff, but I still really like. And so each one of those are going to come. So the 40, you know, regular priced photos will be NFTs will be coming with a handing me photo signed one of one,
Mm-hmm.
and then my next 10 ones will be um, coming with a metal print signed one of one. But that's another thing. It's like, with NFTs, you get to add more value more than the JPEG. Because a lot of people are like, well, do you just show it up on your phone and like that's all you get, or like show it off on your computer? Like, no, a lot of it's such a new venture, so we can add and do whatever we want with this transaction. People who invest in us, we get to say how we give them things. So for example, I'm going to release a class later this year as well on levitation, so I'm planning on the people that buy the high end NFTs will also get first dibs into my class. And maybe I have a bunch of like presets coming out too, so they might get the presets as well. So like I get to give so much, and I get to
Mm-hmm.
also get support so much. So it's a win-win transaction for both my collectors and myself. So that's something so beautiful about NFTs. You know.
That's true, and I actually see it with the fact that I want to send the ETH back to people who got it, and I want them to keep it, and I can change, which is something if I had put it in a gallery, if it was with a third party or whatever, I wouldn't have that control. I wouldn't know who really got it. I wouldn't be able to tell some agency or whatever, hey, we're just gonna like send everything back to people because I want to thank them, for I'm actually super grateful for them even considering investing, which is not a small amount, into my art, into what I created, especially because it's been very different from what I put out there for the rest of those years, for what people know me for. And that's where you see that community you're talking about, where you can create a community with your collectors. You can send them whatever you want in a way, and I get to do that, which I would have never imagined with anything else. Like even if you were to ship a print, yeah, I could refund you, but it doesn't have the same aspect as uh, you're part of this community, because I kind of see you live in that virtual space versus I ship you a print. I have no clue whatever happened to your print.
Yeah, yeah. There,
And
there's such
now,
a connection.
yeah, now you can see it in real life. You can, I mean, in digital real life, and it's validated that this is a piece that was owned by XYZ. And someone asked me actually, that could be interesting for you too, the other day. They're like, hey, do you sign your prints and stuff? I'm like, I still haven't found a good way to make it look good and for me to print it, because my signature is like kind of trash, and I haven't found a way. So a lot of uh, fine art things, they do give certificates, but I'm like, you don't need certificates anymore. You just give an
NFT.
NFT. If that person, there you go. That's your certificate of authenticity. You have that one of one NFT with a one of one print, or one of 10. And if you have both that, and you can show that you have the NFT, then that's your proof right there that you're the original owner. And I was like, oh, that's completely shift. Totally awesome. I love how it's going. There's so many use cases. Like, I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep when I started brainstorming more on that.
Oh man, it's once you see the light, it's very hard for you to look at life the same way again. Another use case is a lot of musicians. One of my friends, Ollie Chan, just released his album, and he made a lot of money, but also like he gave a lot. And he gave like
Mm-hmm.
a 4D animation of like his studio, so like you're able to like put it in your phone and like you're actually walking through his studio. And then like everybody has access to, like all the people that bought it have access to his album. He got pretty much royalty of that album, and if they sell it, he will forever have royalty off that album. And that's like such a powerful thing. Like you completely just overrode a record label, a record deal in which they give you money which you have to pay back, and and then they take like 80% or something of everything else you ever make in your whole life. And the fact that he gets to take all of it, I mean, that to me is just a win-win. And he gets to package it the
Oh,
way he wants it. So it's just remarkable.
so sorry. It just struck something. Okay, imagine everyone. Here's $1 billion idea. Spotify, right? They're
Yep.
centralizing all their tracks and everything and licensing. Now imagine everyone's like kind of their own licensor and decentralized. But with Web 3.0, anyone can connect their wallets, right? So you have a platform that's decentralized. That's basically a window into the ownerships of all tracks that exist. And now, so you connected your wallet, right? And you have a library. You bought those artists. Now imagine like artists would, you in your smart contract you have something that every time your track is played you get X amount or you get X% or whatever. I don't exactly know where that X would come from yet, but you could imagine where it doesn't have to go through Spotify. It literally goes directly through to the people who owns a track and to the artist directly, you know? And yeah, it's fascinating. And yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. You know, that democratization
Huh.
builds more opportunity and more equity to the artists. And
Yeah.
so that to me, I mean, that's why I couldn't sleep for the last 2 weeks as well. I mean, it's a very exciting time. And and I think this time artists are coming at it full force. And from my second agency, from Incommon, like there's been times where like I had to speak to clients and say, hey, by the way, oh, you want to hire this creative that's part of the team? That's awesome. But just so you know, like they're charging this amount because they're making more money off with NFTs than they are with you right now. So you really
Yeah.
have to learn how to like give back to creatives, otherwise it won't work for you. And that's such a powerful leverage we didn't have before. So it's a new world we're living in, Pierre. It's exciting.
It is very exciting. I'm very curious to see. I pulled back a little bit from it because I was getting sucked in too hard. But I'm very excited to see what happens and how that takes us. I'm gonna jump back to something to the microdosing part because I think I need to make a public announcement. If you do experiment with psychedelics, just be very mindful and understand the risk rewards and everything else around it. It can be beautiful tools, but they're also extremely powerful. So just be careful. It's like taking a sport cars for the first time. You know, you can easily crash into a wall without realizing you accelerated.
Yeah, so this is not a medical advice, everything we spoke about here today. And I guess we take no
For sure.
responsibility, but just do the most adultish thing you can. And
Wait,
may,
adults are
yeah.
like big kids. It's bad advice. I'm joking. Adults are the worst. We're the one screwing up the word. No, I'm joking.
Word of the word.
That's so true. No, I just wanted to highlight that because it can be incredibly good tools, but I think just like with everything, there needs to be an understanding of what you're working with and how you're working with it. It's very different from the narrative that we've been fed, where you think you're gonna see fireflies and dragons and uh, and unicorns running around you with a wall. It's very very
So,
different. So
something I'll always remember that you told me, Pierre, was in order for you to be untethered, at first you need to explore tethered or something like that.
yeah,
You know, in which like you have to ground yourself a lot more. And this is why like I highly recommend meditating before, having a journal and journaling before, being in a good emotion while exploring these you know these journeys, and and also having a purpose for your journey, because you can go out there and just like live it off and just you know like let it flow. But I think it's a good idea to, you know, there's cases where people have stopped smoking or stopped drinking or like stopped doing heroin after like 4 or 5 like guided trips with mushrooms. So like it is so powerful, but I would recommend for people to have an idea of where they want to go and work through that as they are in this journey.
yeah, and most of the success story you hear from are from people who work in a psycho-assisted therapy context, psychotherapy context, so context, not contest, context. So you have to put stuff in perspective, and you can obviously, yeah. I mean, you do what you want in life. You know, it's up to you and to your responsibility, and depending on the legalities in your country also. But interesting tools to say the least, to be taken with caution, for sure. I will tap a little bit more into something. What's next for you with you, Eric, in terms of creative work? Because you've redefined or like you've reworked on like what you're doing. Are you planning to pull back of the commercial, or do you want to get involved more into the community? And maybe you can speak a little bit about what work you've been doing there, because I feel like you're very involved into, like you mentioned, helping also others find a path, either it's as artists or just like people in life. How do we navigate?
um the last few months have been elemental in terms of putting the pieces together for all these things that I think I told you that I haven't done, that I need to do, that I feel it in my
Mm-hmm.
heart to do. I've helped, now I think I can comfortably say, hundreds of creatives by them, but one-on-ones in which like we look through their business, their contracts, their branding positioning, like, hey, you need a new bio, or like, hey, you've done all these great
Mm-hmm.
things, but you haven't shown them correctly. I want these artists to shine.
Yeah.
But I've realized uh, I can help so many more people, and at a grander level. So I do want to start a YouTube talking about the business of being a creative, talking about the ways that you should look into yourself as a brand, as an entrepreneur, things that have costed me so much, so many sleepless nights, so much pain, and so much money loss. But I've learned through these experiences, and I would love to see a 14, 15-year-old kid not commit the same mistakes that I did coming up in this business. So YouTube is a must. I am finished. Actually, we just finished shooting the last episodes for my levitation class. So I want to give it all back. There's no secrets here. I want to be able to be as helpful to other people in finding their art, or adding more toolkits to their art form. So my levitation
Yeah.
class should be coming in this December. So that's finalizing, and this NFT collection, which I've been putting my heart and soul for the last 2 weeks. And then in terms of, like, I guess, long-term goals, I am still building in common. I did take a little bit of time away from that as I was building all these things around my IP, my intellectual property, that I felt I needed to give out and put into the world. But coming back to In Common, I really want to, help more creatives through that. I really want to be able to compete against these big agencies, and bring more money back into the creatives' pockets, and do better work with creatives. And the beautiful thing with In Common is what we're doing is also bringing more money back to communities. So you see, the business model for regular agencies is 80-20, in which 80% of the money that comes in is pretty much revenue. So they
Mm-hmm.
use it for their billing and their insurances, and like offices and all, like, all those extra costs. But we're dealing with entrepreneurs of their own now, so it's like dealing with all these young, or like, well, not even young, like all these world level creatives from all over the world who can produce agency level work. And so
Yeah.
what that allows us to do is to use this 80%. So flip the script. Instead of 20% being spent on creatives, we're spending probably 90% on creatives and a 10
Mm-hmm.
on educating the creatives. But reinvesting this money back into creatives, and with that money, we still have enough to be able to give back to communities. So one thing
Mm-hmm.
that I just did with Red Bull and my good friend Matisse from the 76ers 2 months ago was we just decided to go on a photo walk. We produced a photo walk, and photos taken at that play during the photo walk are going to be now repurposed and put into a gallery in Lapson and Hammer, which is like this high-end boutique store in Philly, for everybody to see for a couple of days. So it's really
Nice.
shining light on creatives once again, shining light on communities once again. And instead of utilizing all this money and funneling it and then just doing one thing, we can actually afford now, through this different way of doing business, to invest back into communities, to educate more kids, to create agencies in the middle of underserved communities, and have all these young creatives who want to be creatives learn Photoshop or learn photography, learn film, have speakers, and I think I guess I'm well connected now in the world of art, so I can bring in artists or athletes or big players in the game to talk about, just like you and I are doing now, on their beginnings, on their travels, on their journeys, on their experiences, so that young kids can learn from them. And I think that's super important. That you know we see a lot of brands say they do, but it's just a PR stunt. And I'm telling you this because I've seen it. I am a commercial
It's
photographer.
like
I've
it's
been
like
there,
greenwashing.
and I'm tired of that, man. And I think we really need to move the if we're gonna move it forward, we can't only speak about it, we have to do it. And so
Yeah.
I'm working with a lot of companies, and Red Bull has been an incredible partner, to be able to actually get these things moving, and get these things done, and actually move the pendulum forward and educate these kids, because that's the best form of marketing, honestly. It's not even like selling your product, but it's actually helping other people out. And a few brands see that. So I hope more people see that, and more brands invest in projects like In Common.
That's amazing. I love it, especially because I mean, you and I, we've talked about that a little bit, even for just myself, where you get used to charging X, so you think that's it, and then I talked with you, I talked with two other people in New York, and suddenly I'm like, whoa,
You're not
wow,
charging
okay.
enough, dude. Yeah.
I can be charging more. Interesting. Okay, let's send them double of what they were proposing. I was like, okay, I'm gonna give them like 30% more, which sounded okay, but I still felt like it was low. And then I'm like, okay, let's go like I was an agency. And if you think about as if you were an agency, even if you're less people, suddenly you're like, whoa, okay, so if those guys, if let's say Adobe contracts an agency and then that agency pays you, you're like, Adobe is already throwing so much money at the agency, and that agency's goal now is to get it as cheap as possible with the best results, depending on what kind of contract they have with the agency. But even if it's a contract where Adobe gives them a 100K budget, and the agency and Adobe is like, you get 20% of that budget, their goal is going to be spending that budget as much as possible, but not necessarily on creatives. It could be on many things.
You pointed out something useful, which you said, itemizing it in a sense, and that's the
Yes.
thing that I've realized. So I developed a system, and now we've included it in common with most of our artists, but it's called a leverage sheet. And what I do is all my experiences, all my previous clients, all of the things I have to bring to the table. Because remember, when you're a photographer or creative, you're not just a photographer or creative. You're producing it, you're art directing it, you're creative directing it. You might be scouting, you might be even the post production, editing. All these are different elements. Renting, right? All of these are different elements that agencies charge by the hour sometimes, or like by the
Mm-hmm.
project. And so if you start itemizing all these things, and then having conversations with companies or brands that want to work with you with an itemized perspective of like, oh, you want to do a photo shoot? Oh, so you want me to produce it? Oh, so you want me to scout it? Oh, you also want me to do the creative direction and come up with the idea? Oh, okay. All of these things are a different budget because that's how agencies work. And guess what? People are not going to treat you like, whoa, who the hell does this person think he is? But they're actually going to treat you with more respect because now you know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about all the different tools and systems that you use to create the beautiful image that you do, the beautiful work that you do. So it's all about learning that lingo from a business perspective so you can show these companies the ROI. Oh, that's why he or she costs so much. Because the issue, I think, is at times is very polar because there's artists that don't know how to charge enough because they think like, oh my God, but I'm just shooting a photo. No, you're doing all these things I just told you about. And then there's other artists who are like, yeah, it's going to be 100K. And you're like,
Yeah.
explain to me why that's 100K. And then they can't explain it to you. And then they look like assholes. So the
Because
key
my
here
name
is,
is
yeah,
Mr. Global.
whatever, whatever ego. So the thing is bringing it back, talking directly. And I've always been a man of like, listen, I don't want to overcharge, and I just
Yeah.
want to charge what's right. I want to charge through all the work that I've done, and you see the kind of quality that you're working with, and you see how my productions work. I just want to charge what's fair. I want you to pay me what's fair, and I want you to be happy. I want you to be a happy customer, and that's, I
Yeah.
think, where a good transaction and a good long-term business partnership can exist. But if you're trying to take, and if they're trying to take, I mean, a world full of takers just leads to nothing, and I don't like living in that world.
Yeah, it's like someone put it for me. It's a world of we're just trying to extract, but give nothing. Uh, it's a great point. That's something I always saw. Like, okay, you're ready to pay this. How do we make sure you get value out of it? And sometimes it takes, especially if you're creative and you have an audience, just think for a few seconds. If you work with a phone brand and they have $1,000 phone, and you created a campaign, how many people do you need to influence to actually for them to make a positive ROI? Like when you think
Yeah.
about it, like their $1,000 phone is already with including all their margins, right? So if you take that price and you influence 10 people out of, I don't know, thousands that watch your video,
You're already made the
well,
money
I'm
back.
sorry, you're already at 10K, and you influence 10 people to potentially buy it. And when you think about it like that, you're like, oh, it doesn't make sense sometimes how little one might charge for certain commercial and influence work. And it makes sense why bigger people charge so much in a way, because the, after a while, after you stay long enough in the game, you start to understand like the value behind it. In the beginning, I think you don't see it. That's why you see a lot of talk around micro influencer who are better, because obviously it's cheaper when people don't really know their
Yeah.
worth at the beginning.
And brand partnership is a thing too. You know, we need to look at ourselves, as I said before. You're a brand. You are, if you're a business, you're a brand and you represent something. So it's redefining what do you represent and what kind of brands do you want to align yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So like the way I've always looked at myself is like, I want to be an Apple in my business. How can I look
Yeah.
at myself as an Apple within this industry? Oh, my website needs to be flawless. My email signature needs to be flawless. The marketing behind needs to be flawless. My presentation needs to be flawless. When I communicate to people, I need to communicate this way. Like it's so much more than just the picture. You know,
Yeah.
it's the whole experience around the business, and that's exactly the way that you should look at yourself going forward as a creative. If you're listening, you know, think of
A
yourself as a
hundred.
brand, and yeah, aim for the stars.
I think that's great. Look at yourself like an experience, Eric. I think I like what you're saying. You're bringing an experience, not just the art. That's true. It's very, very true. I love it. I think I want to be mindful with our time. I think we'll put a hold here and keep some for a future episode, especially after in a few months. I'll be curious to see where things have gone with new directions and everything. And when New York coming back to life, also, it was incredibly busy, by the way. I
Oh, it's
still can't believe.
crazy. It's crazy right now.
I'm like, where are all those people coming from?
And
They
it's
were hiding
cold now
underground.
too. It's cold now too, and people are still coming out like it's 1967, you know.
That's amazing. Eric, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. Yeah, I'd love to do a round two in the future so we can dig into more aspects. Maybe if you guys have any questions around what we talked about, we'll put a link in the description. I'll put a few links around topics that maybe we didn't dive into, but I think are good to explore. And yeah, Eric, what a blast.
Pierre, thank you so much for having me, and for everybody that listened through these. That's a lot. It's an hour and almost 2 hours. Wow, it's a lot, you know, through this long period. It's a pleasure to talk to you, Pierre. Thank you so much for having me and always being such a good friend. And thank you to everybody listening.
If you had to leave people with a thought for the post-COVID world, or actually we don't even know if there will be a post, but the after we think we're all gonna die.
Um, Damn, I can get very philosophical really quick now. But at the end of the day, I think it's a mix of what are you doing and who are you doing it for, and are you happy? And if
Hmm.
those three things, you get to solve those three things, I think you'll find out a lot about the purpose of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And hopefully that leads you in a direction that is more keen to your sensibility as a human, not just as somebody who wants to, you know, do the whatever on this earth, because there's much more than that. Yeah, I think the purpose of your being is powerful, so dig in for that.
I love it. Thank you so much, Eric. Everyone, Erick Hercules. You'll find everything in the show notes. Go say hi on Instagram and all the different platforms. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.